What would you get if you took a giant robot, a power drill, all the cheesy, typical youngster-aimed anime stuff you could imagine, and a ham sandwich just for the hell of it, rolled them up into a ball and shot out of a cannon? Well, you'd probably get an analogy that doesn't really make any sense, but you'd also get the anime Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, which happens to be what I'm here to talk about. So let's say we do this thing. Now, the name of the show translates to something like Heaven-Breaking Crimson Face, which happens to be the name of the giant robot that stars in the show, but let's back up a bit. The show starts off under the premise that the world, for the most part, is a barren desert ruled by a race of beastmen who pilot giant, goofy-looking robots called gonmen. Humans, in the meantime, have taken to living in underground villages and caves in order to stay out of the way of their furry overlords. It is in one of these human-sized ant farms that the show's two main characters reside, Simon and Kamina. Simon is a young boy whose job and hobby is digging through the ground with his trusty drill in search of whatever he may find. He's also an orphan who lost his parents to an earthquake several years ago, and as you might already expect, he's the kind of hopeful, bright-eyed youth who wants to go out and explore the world and believes that there is something out there on the surface, which everyone else has long since given up on. His only support in his belief is his surrogate brother, Kamina, whom he calls Aniki since they aren't actually related, and to put it simply, Kamina is the sheer embodiment of all the incredibly typical and corny shonen series never give up, I'm the main character and I can't lose mentality that you've ever seen. It's pretty clear they made him like that on purpose, since his motto is, throw away your logic and kick reason to the curb. And he and Simon have this rather yogi and boo-boo relationship, if any of you remember that, where Simon goes, I don't think this is such a good idea, and Kamina replies by saying something like, don't worry, a real man never thinks ahead and jumps into things with all his heart, then reassuringly kicks Simon into the middle of whatever calamity they happen to be involved in. And given his crazy, goofball nature and shirtless physique, I'm sure there's more than one yaoi-loving fangirl who has written things about him. Anywho, the story starts off when one day Simon happens to find a small, rideable robot amongst the dirt, which Kamina enthusiastically names Lagann. And as if on cue, not much later, one of the big old gunmen comes crashing down into the city, and the only way to beat it and escape to the surface is for Simon to pilot Lagann. Along with the gunman falling into the city comes Yoko, who... do I really have to say anything? Typical shallow female character with a huge gun and very little modesty and or self-respect. Is she always around? Yes. Does she really add anything to the story? Just a little. She doesn't get more than a smidge of character development, and even the one episode focused around here is just crappy filler. I think it's rather obvious she's just fat bait, and personally I find no appeal in these type of skanky characters who might as well be wearing a neon sign that says free vagina. Anyway, the three of them get to the surface and start wandering around in search of other humans, and along the way Kamina steals a gunman and renames it Gurren. Then, just to make it perfectly clear the seriousness level of the show, Simon and Kamina fight an enemy gunman, during which Kamina goes, we're losing! Hey Simon, come on, let's unite our robots! Simon, but Kamina, I don't think these are supposed to do that. Kamina, what do you mean? They're giant robots, aren't they? Trust me. Kamina then grabs Lagann and smashes the little robot into the top of his big robot. Looking very awkward, but sure enough, all of a sudden they start combining and turn into the Megazord, Gurren Lagann, and kick the ass of every enemy they meet thereafter, with their new goal being free humans from the tyranny of the Spiral King. And no, I'm not going to tell you about what Kamina does in the huge freaking spoiler in Episode 8. Along their adventure, they run into several other characters. Rossyu, the nervous kid who I can't stop thinking looks too much like Faye from Xenogears. The mostly comic relief team of Kitan and his sisters. Eventually Nia, who plays the role of Jill in the box, hey, I'm a cute and sheltered princess, everyone fawn over me, main character love interest type. Personally, I found her as typical as Yoko and as well as rather annoying, though she does have a little more development. Her voice also bugs the crap out of me because it's so high-pitched yet flat and uninteresting. So in short, female characters in this show are weak sauce. There's also Viral, the high-ranking beastman soldier who serves as mid-level villain and Kamina's rival. However, I'll tell you right now that as soon as I heard him say his name, my anime sensors went off, and I knew he was going to be one of those I'll eventually become a reluctant good guy villains. Oops, minor spoiler. But he's a likable villain/rival character, and that part with him in the last episode was very nicely done, I might add. Now, what sets this show apart from all the other giant robot shonen animes, besides its light-hearted, silly tone where it completely doesn't take itself seriously, is that the story is actually split into two parts. The first part is up to episode 15 and deals with the characters taking on the Spiral King to free the human race, and the second part is episodes 17 to 27, 16 as a recap, where the story skips to 7 years later and the characters have to start fighting off enemies from space. What's good about it, though, is that the second part takes the show in a somewhat more serious direction, with not only facing new enemies, but also with the characters having to deal with the panic and blame as the civilization they themselves started and even some of their own friends begin to turn on them and hate them, even though they're trying to save everybody. And it's actually a rather interesting little story as you start to watch not just for fun, but because you have to see what happens next. In the second part, they also start talking about spiral power. What is that? Well, put simply, it's you and your burning heart, as some kind of mysterious power humans have where whenever you get really determined, everything glows green and you can magically morph machines into whatever giant robot needs you may have, which explains a lot of the first half shenanigans. So be careful the next time you get road rage, you might turn your Volkswagen into Optimus Prime. But with drills. The show has a nice, quick pace to it with very little downtime or filler, and one of the fun things about it is that it has a constant sense of growth as the characters become stronger. This is done to an enjoyably ridiculous extent, as in the second part Gurren Lagann fuses with a starship to become Arc Gurren Lagann, which is so giant that the first giant robot is its pilot. Then that giant robot combines with the moon to make an even gianter robot than that. And in the final battle, the robots are so incredibly huge that they are flinging galaxies at each other like shurikens. I'm serious. There was also the scene where a bunch of people on the spaceship deck yammering technobabble to explain how the giant robot punched the bad guy so hard that it tore a hole in the space-time continuum, which I found hilarious. Okay, yes, that is exactly what you think it is. Those crazy Japs. As far as the show's production goes, the animation is simple but well done as the show has a decent budget, and it gets very hyperactive during some of the fight scenes as though all the artists had ADD or something. However, it's still followable and fun to watch. The voices are nice for the most part, though I already told you I hated Nia's voice. The rest of them are done pretty well though, and you can tell the seiyus had fun with it. I do think that Tetsuya Kakihara could have done a little better being young Simon, but since he's also doing the voice of Jin Kisaragi in BlazBlue, I won't begrudge him much. The music is pretty solid and is used very effectively by the director, ranging from rocky to imitation rap to inspiring orchestrals, as well as being one of the few times when I actually don't mind there being lyrics in the background music, which usually bothers me, like in the first episode of Bleach when they play that number 1 song, which then and every time thereafter they play it completely ruins the drama of the scene. But the show is put together very nicely, and it's a guilty pleasure of mine to go back and keep watching 2 scenes from episodes 8 and 25 because they're just so damn well done. I guess in the end, this is a show you either love or hate. It has a lot of good in it, but it's also got a fair amount of not so good. And the only real question is which of those weighs more to you, which will more or less be answered by how seriously you decide to take it. If you approach this show with the expectations of a seasoned Gundam fan or something, then you'll probably just say, what the hell, this is stupid, and deem the show as such. However, if you do what the show did and say, you know what, screw it, we're going to be crazy and cheesy and we're going to do it on purpose and just have fun with it, then chances are you'll find it very easy to forgive it for its flaws and you'll have yourself an enjoyable time watching this anime. Thank you, and I'm sorry folks, it's Gurren Lagann. I have to do this right. And good night.